Do you ever find yourself frustrated at the lack of original films being made today? If you were so inclined, you could leave behind the endless stream of prequels, sequels, remakes, and reimaginings and discover an entire world of fantastic foreign films. If, in the words of Parasite director Bong Joon-ho, you are ready to overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles. In this video, I'm going to talk about some foreign films that I love. Some of these films are rather well known, some of them are relatively obscure, but regardless, they're all well-crafted, impactful films that I think you will enjoy. The first film is one from the man who's done more than anyone in the last several years to expand the influence of foreign films, and that is South Korean director Bong Joon-ho. I, like many others, was only introduced to his work through Parasite, despite him having made a couple of films in English, Snowpiercer and Okja, beforehand. One of his Korean films that garnered interest from the Western producers of those films was 2009's Mother. Mother follows a middle-aged woman who lives a meager existence with her intellectually disabled son, who at the beginning of the film is hanging out with a mischievous friend who's a bad influence on her innocent son. The friend's troublesome streak attracts trouble, and the titular mother's son is implicated in a murder case. And to make matters worse, the police take advantage of his mental deficiency and coerce him into signing a confession. With the obstacle of disinterested lawyers and consolidated condemnation in her way, his mother must battle against all the odds to exonerate her son. A full decade before making Parasite, Bong demonstrated his prowess at genre blending with this film, alternating between family drama, thriller, and at times even horror and comedy. Mother reaches into all areas of the emotional spectrum, and with the help of some terrific performances, delivers a poignant film that you won't soon forget. I don't think Mother is Bong's best film, but it's a worthy entry on this list considering how often it is overlooked in favor of films like The Host and Memories of Murder. Mother is available to stream with a Fubo TV subscription and a premium Amazon Prime Video subscription. Staying in South Korea, the next film is one from another acclaimed international director, although one that Western audiences will likely be less familiar with. That director is Lee Chang-dong, and the film in question is 2018's Burning. Burning stars two excellent Korean actors, as well as Steven Yeun in a link of a chain of great performances from him post-Walking Dead. This acting trio amplify a plot that might sound pretty pedestrian if you were to judge it solely on its synopsis. Our protagonist is a young, aspiring novelist who works as a delivery man to pay off the debts accrued by his father. One day, while on the job, he encounters a woman who claims to be a former classmate. He has no memory of her, yet pursues an awkward relationship with her anyway, and agrees to feed her cat while she's away on a trip to Africa. He picks her up at the airport when she returns, and finds her with Steven Yeun's character, a slick, wealthy, and mysterious young man with sociopathic traits. Initially, our protagonist resents him and his wealth. That resentment develops into intrigue when he confides in the protagonist a strange hobby he indulges in, the occasional burning of greenhouses. Lee Chang-dong's film was met with nearly universal acclaim. Critics have called it the best Korean film ever made. I'm not entirely sure I would say that personally, but in my opinion, Burning is certainly one of the better overall films of the last few years. The cinematography, especially in that dance scene, and the performances play a role in that, but what makes it great is the atmosphere of unease and indecipherable tension that builds and builds until the catharsis of the climax. A good deal of the film is spent in intimate conversations between characters, in quiet moments of isolation, and yet my attention never wandered. Burning is very ambiguous, but it doesn't feel pretentious. I'm not quite sure how it does it, but the ambiguity doesn't induce confusion but only more interest. Burning is an intricate puzzle that encourages and benefits from multiple viewings. Burning is available to stream on Amazon Prime Video and available to watch for free on Pluto TV, Viki, Vudu, and Tubi. Moving on to the great cinematic nation of Japan, the next movie on this list is the classic horror thriller Cure from director Kiyoshi Kurosawa, no relation to Akira. This is a film that is beloved by Bong Joon-ho, who called it one of the greatest films of all time, and a film that had a very strong influence on his career. This is a film I've described as the Japanese Seven, and if you're a fan of that film, Cure needs to be placed towards the top of your to-watch list immediately. Plot-wise, it has some very similar bones to Fincher's film. It follows a pair of detectives investigating a string of ominous murders that share similar murderous craftsmanship. I don't want to delve more deeply into the plot because the twists are interesting and unique, and I don't want to risk spoiling them. Cure thrives on a dark, foreboding atmosphere, and Kurosawa excels at cinematically simulating the turbulent mental state of its protagonist. And just like Fincher's Seven, Cure has a stellar and very memorable ending. Cure is one of the best detective thrillers ever made, in my opinion, and is available to stream on the Criterion Channel. Staying in Japan, but traveling back in time about 30-odd years, the next film we're going to talk about is the horror classic Onibaba. Horror is a word I use lightly when talking about Onibaba because while it's described as such and has a bit of an eerie ambiance, it's much more of a period drama. The period it depicts is medieval Japan during a civil war. In a marshy area near the sea and flanked by a field of tall reeds, the mother and wife of Kishi, a soldier off at war, live together in a small hut and survive by luring lost soldiers to their deaths and looting their bodies. The pair don't live together harmoniously, but they do live well enough to survive on their own. That changes with the arrival of Hachi, a neighbor and friend of Kishi who tells them that Kishi has passed away in the war. Hachi strikes up a romance with Kishi's widow, sparking an anger and jealousy within Kishi's mother that has deadly consequences. Onibaba is one of the essential Japanese movies of the 1960s, and in my eyes, one of the key reasons why is the immersive atmosphere. The cinematography is great, as well as the performances and the engaging conflict between the characters, but Onibaba's X factor is the incredible and hypnotic sound design. It's some of the best sound design I've seen in a movie, and is chiefly responsible for the film's immersive quality. Onibaba is available to stream on HBO Max and the Criterion Channel. The next film on the list was also made in the 1960s, and its production spans 2 continents. It's also the first film to be simultaneously nominated for Best Picture and Best Foreign Film at the Oscars, of which it won the latter. The film in question is Z from Greek director Costa Gravas. Z is a provocative political thriller, and as Gravas states in the opening credits, any likeness of his characters to real people is not coincidental, it's intentional. Z is based on the 1963 assassination of Greek politician Grigoris Lambrakis, and the response from the corrupted political establishment of the time. Many of the film's events were lifted straight from the pages of history, and what is remarkable about Z is the way that Gravas blends fact and fiction, providing a thrilling movie-watching experience without compromising with the truth. Z has been cited as a major influence for filmmakers such as Steven Soderbergh and Oliver Stone, and its documentary style famously provided a template for William Friedkin when he was making The French Connection. The film's elusive title, Z, refers to a commonly used Greek protest slogan, meaning, "He lives." Much like its title, Gravas' film will live into the years to come. Z is available to stream on HBO Max and the Criterion Channel. The next film on the list is an unfortunately overlooked work from the filmography of the great Werner Herzog, 1977's Stroszek. A sometimes funny, sometimes tragic, and consistently absurd tale about misfits, a twisted American dream, and dancing chickens, Stroszek begins in West Germany with our protagonist, Bruno, a perpetually drunk street accordion performer. He, his prostitute girlfriend Eva, and his eccentric elderly neighbor form a bizarre trio that travel to rural Wisconsin in search of greener pastures. What follows is a strange satire of the ideal of abundant American prosperity from a European perspective. The sheer absurdity of the events is enough to entertain, but what makes Stroszek a great film is the pathos of its protagonist. Bruno is an outcast, chewed out from his homeland. He couldn't find his place in society, and it wasn't an entrenched issue within West German society, as he realized when he woke up from his American dream. A big part of the film's appeal is the genuine performance from Bruno S., a non-actor who piqued Herzog's interest and was subsequently cast in two of his films, the other being The Enigma of Caspar Hauser. Judging from Bruno's performance, I think it's safe to say that Herzog's intuition was spot on. Of Bruno S., Herzog said, quote, "In all my films, and with all the great actors with whom I have worked, he was the best. There was no one who comes close to him. I mean in his humanity and the depth of his performance. There is no one like him." Stroszek is available to stream on Tubi. This next film is probably the most unorthodox film on this list. It is the 1992 Belgian mockumentary Man Bites Dog. This is, in my opinion, the best mockumentary I've ever seen. It was made by 4 Belgian film students, and like most mockumentaries, it was made on a shoestring budget, forcing the filmmakers to make the most out of the limited resources available to them. And in my view, they did a better job than most. Man Bites Dog follows a student documentary crew as they follow around a serial killer who is equal parts charismatic and chilling. The crew picks his brain on the nature of his craft as he sees it and records him in action. As the film goes along, they become more involved, and the consequences of their entanglement with the serial killer prove deadly. Man Bites Dog is a true black comedy. At times it can be very funny, but it can also be really horrific. The laissez-faire attitude of the characters towards the violence adds a strange dimension to the horror of the film. It can definitely trigger a strong emotional response. It's a very provocative film and certainly in a league of its own. I would recommend it, but only if you're sure that you have the stomach to bear it. Man Bites Dog is available to stream currently on HBO Max. The next film on the list is the 2015 German film Victoria from director Sebastian Schipper. The trend of films being shot in one continuous take, or rather films with the appearance of being shot in one continuous take, have become very popular with films like Birdman in 1917, but in my mind, Victoria stands out as being the best. The film follows a young Spanish woman on a night out alone in Berlin. At around 4 a.m., she befriends a group of German men, and just when it seems like their night is coming to an end, she gets entangled in their criminal involvement. Victoria was filmed in one continuous 2.5-hour take, and much of the dialogue was improvised. This gave the film a really engaging sense of realism and makes the viewer feel like a fly on the wall, and at times almost like you're intruding on the character's night. Victoria takes its time familiarizing us with its characters. Up until the midpoint, the film has pretty much been just a series of conversations. But when the story turns in a fateful way, the tension is cranked all the way up, and the film had me on the edge of my seat for the rest of its runtime. With the first half, the film excels at acquainting us with the characters, so whenever they experience terror, ecstasy, grief, tension from then on out, we're firmly placed in their shoes. The continuous take definitely assists with that immersive quality of the story and its characters. Victoria is an incredibly impressive and powerful piece of filmmaking, and it is criminally underlooked, in my opinion. You can currently stream Victoria on Tubi, Showtime, and AMC+. Our next film is a 1988 French-Dutch joint production called The Vanishing. The film opens with a young Dutch couple, Rex and Saska, driving through France on a vacation. They stop at a gas station. Saska goes inside to buy a couple of drinks, and she never returns. Rex searches for her relentlessly, launching an advertisement campaign to find her that continues for years. Simultaneously, we're introduced to the man responsible for her vanishing, and are given an intimate view into his life. When he sees Rex appear on television talking about his mission to find his lost girlfriend, the perpetrator decides to pay Rex a visit. I saw The Vanishing pretty recently, and it is one of the best thrillers I've seen in a long time. It partly influenced the making of this video. Instead of building tension by shrouding our nefarious antagonist in mystery, the filmmakers make an attempt to peer inside his psyche, to probe the mind of a sociopath. What drives the tension and the story is precisely what Rex has obsessed over for years: the mystery of what exactly happened to his girlfriend. We finally find out in the film's ending, and the answer is absolutely chilling and makes for one of the best movie endings I think I've ever seen. I recognized immediately just how much influence The Vanishing had over some of the better thrillers of the decades that followed it. Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners is one that immediately springs to mind. The director parlayed the success of this film into an American remake with Jeff Bridges and Kiefer Sutherland. I haven't seen the remake, but from what I understand, it wasn't nearly as effective as the original film. One big fan of The Vanishing was Stanley Kubrick, who called it the most terrifying film he'd ever seen. If you're interested in discovering why, you can by streaming it on the Criterion channel. The final film on my list is one of my personal favorite films from the last few years. The film I put at number 1 on my top 10 list for 2020, Thomas Vinterberg's Another Round, starring the great Mads Mikkelsen. Another Round follows 4 Danish high school teachers who, out of a shared sense of dissatisfaction for their lots in life, stumble upon a philosophical idea that human beings are born with a blood alcohol deficit of 0.05, and they use that interesting idea as the foundation for an experiment. They will start drinking during the work days, but only until their blood alcohol content reaches 0.05. At first, the experiment is a raging success. The men feel totally reinvigorated, and it pays off dividends in their teaching. But, as one may expect, the experiment soon gets out of hand, and the 4 men may not be able to overcome the hangover. In my view, Another Round sees Mads Mikkelsen in his best form. The performances accentuate the inspired direction of Vinterberg in his nuanced take on the relationship between alcohol and middle-age malaise. On the surface, it may appear that this is a film romanticizing alcoholism, but in my view, it's a film about gratitude. The characters had to lose what was most important to them in life to realize what they had in the first place. Mikkelsen's character in the film had 2 sons. Originally, he was supposed to have a son and a daughter, and cast in the role of his daughter was Ida Vinterberg, the director's own daughter, whose tales of Danish drinking culture inspired the genesis of the film. 4 days into filming, Ida was killed in a car crash in Belgium. The film is dedicated to her, and it's apparent that much of Winterberg's grief was transmuted into the subject matter. Her death severely altered the thematic trajectory of the story. Instead of ending his film on a somber note, however, Winterberg stressed that he wanted to conclude another round on a more life-affirming note. And in that electrifying final sequence, he certainly accomplishes that.